Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mrs. Mary Holman George.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines.
There's the command, Mary Holman George, and the engine roars alive.
Welcome to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, home of the 500, NASCAR's Brickyard 400, and MotoGP's Red Bull Indianapolis GP motorcycle event. We hope you'll enjoy your ride around the track. And in consideration of all of our guests, for the next 10 minutes or so, please turn off your cell phones. Thanks. The 500 was held for the first time in 1911. But the track was already in its third year, built early in 1909 as a testing facility for the thriving automobile industry. Many famous makes were from here, like Marmon, National, and Cole, with the best-known ones coming a little later on with Stutz, maker of the famous Bearcat, then, right after World War I, with the Duesenberg brothers. Indiana roads were still a few years away from being paved, so there was nowhere to really find out what an automobile could do and what its weak points might be. This track would solve that problem. Not only could the manufacturers test here privately, but occasional races would give the spectators a chance to see in competition what they could go down to the showrooms and purchase. The man who created all of this was Carl Fisher, the very same man who would later develop Miami Beach from swamplands into an exotic resort area. He also developed Montauk Point on Long Island and spearheaded the first drivable highway across the United States. We enter the track between turns 1 and 2 at the south end short straightaway. Up ahead is turn 2. There are 4 turns, each measuring exactly 1/4 of a mile from entrance to exit, and they are banked at 9 degrees and 12 minutes. The main straightaway, which we will be seeing in about 5 minutes, and a backstretch, coming up in just a moment, each cover 5/8 of a mile, so that the entire track is 2.5 miles around. From time to time along the way, you'll see some of the portions of the road course built between 1999 and 2000 and revised in 2008. It winds through the infield and links back up with the oval over to the northwest. On the right are the original VIP suites built in 1973. We are riding on the very same 2.5 miles used by the drivers 100 years ago. Only the surface has changed. During the fall of 1909, down went 3,200,000 paving bricks, which is why the track still carries the nickname, the Brickyard. And where are the bricks today? Well, about 85% of the way around, they're still there, buried under several layers of asphalt. The most recent repaving job took place in the fall of 2004. If you think you may have spotted a golf course on either side of us, well, you have. It dates back to 1929. It's been revamped a couple of times since, most recently in 1993 by the world-famous Pete Dye, who used to live in Indianapolis. There are now 4 holes inside the track and 14 over on the right. The old course was once a major stop on the PGA Tour, the 500 Open being held between 1960 and 68. Each September between 1994 and 2000, the seniors played here. The 3-2-1 markers over on the outside fence are 100-yard reference points for entering turn 3. The 500 drivers will make the turn at about 220 miles an hour. The NASCAR drivers with cars which are double the weight will go through at about 170 miles an hour. The fastest laps ever completed here by 500 drivers have been right at 240 miles an hour. That means negotiating a 2.5-mile lap in less than 38 seconds. Or to put it another way, it's the equivalent of traveling down a football field in about 9/10 of 1 second. When we are in the turns, you can see the famed safer barriers up against the walls. They have done much to absorb the energy in the event of an accident resulting in wall contact. Safer barriers are coming into more and more use at major tracks, but the very first one was installed at this one in 2002. Carl Fisher had 3 partners, one of whom was James Allison, founder of the famed Allison Engineering. They sold the Speedway in 1927 to a group headed up by World War I flying ace, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, who had in fact been a regular 500 driver before he ever learned how to fly a plane. In 1945, the track was sold to Anton Holman Jr. of Terre Haute, and it has remained in the Holman George family for over 60 years. And there's never been any tax dollars used here. The track is privately owned.
Wow.
Over on the left are the final turns of the road course on their way to linking up again with the oval. Out of turn 4 and onto the main straightaway, corporate suites and double-decker grandstands. And can you imagine going all the way down there in 9 seconds? Drivers making pit stops used to drive all the way down the straight and pull over to their respective pit. In 1957, a separated pit lane was installed, and it may have been the first of its kind anywhere in the world. The current 500 cars have to stop several times during the race. They'll take on up to 22 gallons of fuel and change 4 wheels in less than 10 seconds. And they don't use gasoline. From 1965 until 2006, everyone used methanol. Starting in 2007, the 500 cars have run on ethanol. NASCAR, however, does use gasoline, but blended with 15% ethanol. The tall building on the left is called the Pagoda. It was completed in 2000. This is where the Master Control Tower stood from 1957 until 1998. And prior to 57, a Japanese-style pagoda occupied this spot, and that's the reason for this current design. This one, however, has 10 floors and rises to the equivalent of a 13-story building. At ground level, and slightly over to the left, is the current winner's circle for the 500 and the Brickyard 400, and just above it, the rostrum for the top 3 finishes in the MotoGP motorcycle race. The start-finish line isn't hard to locate. It's marked by a strip of bricks. As late as 1961, when A.J. Foyt won his first 500, the greater part of the main straight was still of bricks and mortar. And imagine that prior to the late 1930s, the entire 2.5 miles looked like that, and it made for a pretty rough ride. Up ahead is the scoring pylon. It went up in 1994 to replace the one there since '59. It's anchored in 22 feet of concrete, and the windsock is 97 feet off the ground. How many 30-watt bulbs are there in it? 6,496. On the left is the entrance to the Speedway's famed garage area and gasoline alley, which, while having changed in appearance over the years, has been back at that approximate location since 1914. We can't see it from here because of the trackside Formula One garages built in 2000. Further down here on the left, just before we enter the turn, is where Victory Lane used to be from 1919 until 1970. Between 1947 and 59, Hollywood actresses were part of the post-race ceremonies, among them, in 1958, a very young Shirley MacLaine. Here we are in the famous Turn 1. On the infield, there is now a 4-turn addition to the road course. Combined with the modification to the complex north of the museum, the number of turns for the road course now stands at 16. That brings us to the south end once again to approximately where we started. A 500 driver at speed would have lapped us, probably about 15 or 16 times. We are open here every day of the year except for Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day.